Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 1000th episode. I knew this day would come. and so I decided to, I guess I should do this probably every 1000th. Um, just a quick recap of like what I'm doing here with these videos. In 2014, I got a sort of inspiration, let's say a vision of inspiration where suddenly it was like a sort of puzzle piece. I felt I noticed the word Mr. Within came to me, and I looked at my life and I realized that uh, there is something, I don't know, there was just a feeling to take my phone, press the record button, and to just speak, to just share. I got this feeling that sort of awareness and sensitivity to my mortality. It's kind of like realizing every day happens once and then being like, so that's it. And then I remember there was this sort of urgency, there was something of a inner inspiration. So, anyways, um, I've recorded of course, way more than 1,000 of these, but it's like they're not uploaded. Anyways, so whoever's listening, welcome to the talk. Feel free to share anything in the comment section. I'm going to get into it. Tonight's title is very crucial and it's very interesting. I was kind of excited to share it. The non-physical maintenance of physicality in my normal life, you can say. I noticed that a lot of how human survival has changed from back in the day till now is that a lot of the things that our biological intensity of movement were required for, it's as if rather than the self evolving, we changed the world. It's as if we are like a creature, like every other creature, on this planet, but we had a sophisticated relationship with our reality. Welcome to the chat section, Celeste. Um, I'm currently residing in Toronto, um, but I mean I travel too, of course. Hopefully, the aim is I establish a sort of lifestyle where I can travel. You know. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna get back into this. The idea of the non physical maintenance of physicality is a suggestion that as you currently are maintaining your body, a lot of it is through subjective acknowledgments. So I consider that every moment of being has an objective realm, has a subjective realm, therefore rendering a subjective self and an objective self. The concept of self and a world don't exist separately, they come together. If there's a self without there being a world, it is in some sense just, you can say, pure sight. You know, if there is a world without a self, there never was any individual notion. We have to consider the human mind is something that is not static. Therefore, a belief cannot satisfy a person. I don't know how many people in the world they have been believing, or they must have had faith. They must have felt that they could not comprehend the depth of their belief. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with believing things. Believing is us. Before you can believe anything, there needs to be an identity. And when you realize your beliefs arise from that identity, anytime you identify with something or anything, trust me, you believe something. So it's kind of this realization that what is being the moment right now, a percentage of it, playfully I'm saying, it's a percentage of it is objective, a percentage of it is subjective. The way I see the objective realm and the subjective realm is that the only reason they can be simultaneous, the only way we can find a solution, a sort of response to the chicken, which came first, the chicken or the egg, which came first, existence or emptiness, non-existence. Physicality came first or non-physicality. The chicken and the egg situation is pretty profound, because really when you look at it, it's like how would the chicken be there if it didn't hatch? How would it hatch if there wasn't a chicken? So in some sense we find ourselves in a dualism that is kind of like Rene Descartes, this French philosopher's mind body dualism. This dude felt his body was in one dimension and his mind was in an unfathomable another, to a point that there was this very smart princess. I think it was one of the Princess Victoria or some princess of the time around him, and this princess was so smart. She was like women back in that day were not that much inclined to, not inclined, but they weren't welcomed into philosophy. And so this princess goes to Rene Descartes, and Rene Descartes, this old man with his like, all his disciples and students and whatnot, is sitting there, and she says something so profound to Rene Descartes. I don't remember the exact word, but I remember what she kind of said to him. She said to him, Rene Descartes, if you say the mind is in a completely separate dimension than the body, then why does the mind need a body? And so that's the beautiful thing. Anytime you hold an axis of duality, time will change that axis, either through the voice of others or through its own terms. So, anyways, what I'm saying is the moment, the objects in the moment, and the subjects in the moment, when they are both observable, the simultaneity of the chicken and the egg. The chicken and the egg is like the concept of the self and the world. Prior to the self and world, there needs to just be awareness of being. It's like, how can I do something if I can't be something? you know? And we find this in not in even not in our only like cultural programs. We find this within. When I speak about what is within, believe it or not, I the word for me has a sort of sacred emotion to it, because one of the most profoundest moments of my life was when I sat down, and it was in 2011. I sat down on a rock, and I was looking at this river, kind of like it was going from behind me forward. So like I was watching the water go forward, and I'm on this rock in the middle of a stream, kind of like cross-legged sitting. And as I'm sitting there, the water is moving forward and my mind is fathoming time. For in that second, the way the direction of that stream was time for me. Whatever you threw in the stream would move forward. Whatever idea conceived in this existential reality felt to me as if the rhythms of life would take it somewhere, you know? I realize I have no idea. Listen to how I'm wording this. In that moment in 2011, I realized I have no idea who is looking out through my eyes. I realize every time I wonder about who's looking through my eyes, a thought projects, thought projects, thought projects. And I was observant of it. I'm like, okay, it's kind of like writing a question, who am I? And then writing in one sentence as an answer. And then tomorrow coming and turning the page and then seeing the question, who am I? And writing another answer, and endlessly seeing that in each answer that you write, you cannot be that which is evolving. So the strange thing is, we have been as creatures identifying with different speeds of phenomena. Now the speeds of phenomena are reaching indistinguishable from non-existent points, especially in the subjective realms. If you're not comfortable with emptiness, there's no point of trying to find depth in the world. Because the issue is if you're looking for an image, the unknown will be dishonored. What I mean by that is, imagine your closest friend comes and talks to you, someone so close it's as if they're a sibling. That friend comes and talks to you, and instead of you talking to them, you, for example, what you do is it's as if you want something, it's as if you are not you in front of them. Do you know? And then that friend is dishonored by the lack of ability of you to feel out what is natural and unnatural. So what I'm saying is, it's like that close friend would be dishonored because you are acting authentically in a state of mind of high precision, high momentum. So what I'm kind of doing, the innovation I'm trying to bring to the table is that, okay, we have been treating ourselves ever since idol worship was stopped. It's as if a dude picked up an object. It's like, yo, this is God. And then someone slapped that object. It's like, no, this isn't God, man. You know? And then what did we start worshiping? We started worshiping language. We are language worshippers until we realize we are not thoughts. Until we realize words could never cage us. What are we, titans, and language is our chain? Language is our chains, you know. So it's very crucial. I realize that before I can actually have an authentic and honest relationship with my experience, I have to have an authentic and honest relationship with how the subjective realm has opened up to be a container for the world. So when I say the non-physical maintenance of physicality, it's kind of realizing, whoa, 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 how is it's like a lot like I'll give you an example. A person, um, let's say a human being, when you look at it back in the day when it was in the food chain, it had to run away. Like it was savage, it was violent, you know, but it was also it had the intelligence of its instincts. Animal instincts is another way of saying man's intelligence was the environment. We evolved in our separation from the environment. Do you know? That means, believe it or not, in this world, a lot of children are grown raised. I'm going to just say it. Most children are raised submissive. And so this is why there's so much cruelty in reality, because that submission builds up this expression of the person not finding an authentic outreach in moments where they've attempted communication in a lifetime. So what I'm saying is, when you feel pushed, you will push back. And that is the only reason there is violence. You know, you can have like a grown man being violent and savage, but the reasoning of why that person is behaving that way could be because of a memory in their childhood where somebody was violent to them out of for no reason. This is how you can tell. This is how you can tell, in any educational system anywhere in the world, which children have, for no reason, violence has entered their lives. You know, all those people, I kind of got like, of course, um, I've changed many schools throughout my life because my family also traveled. But I can tell you this: I attended a school called Tehran International School, uh, and it was a kind of this my family had returned to Iran for some years to live there, and for a few years, you know, and due to my family's kind of business, and so what happened is, a couple of years I spent in this school, Tehran International School, you know, and this school was a sort of school where, let me tell you, it was just a bunch of frustrated kids who their parents had returned from other parts of the world back to Iran. And in some sense, this was the only kind of like really high elevated English kind of Swiss based educational curriculum in the area, you know. So they were teaching English, in that school. So and that school was a school of fighting. Do you know, like what people saw? It's like, I'll tell you, even the weakest people in that school embraced that it was a violent place. Do you know? And so I remember, and of course I have a twin brother, and when we were there, my twin brother would get into fights, and automatically, whenever you're a twin, this is instinctual, It's like twins never fight alone, you know. In that school, there was a lot of fights, you know, and they were physical. And so sometimes there was a situation where you could totally see the internal frustration becoming chaotic, you know? And I'll never forget, there was this one Japanese kid in the school who had such a discipline, and he was a senior year, you know? Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the exposure of violence contaminates the mind and the pattern repeats. What that means is someone comes and slaps you with their right hand. Next time you are in a situation where you have to slap, let's say you're in a kind of, bar slapping, you know, or let's say you want to slap a volleyball. A volleyball is being thrown in the air, and so how do you go slap it? You slap it in the same way you were slapped as a child. Do you know what I mean? So, what I'm saying is, in one moment of your life, an experience can echo into other moments of your life. And so, this is why the inner realm has to be brought into conscious responsibility, and this will be chaotic. We are at the pioneer stage. So, I always consider this is the safest thing. It's like the Elon Musk shared something revolutionary, that when he was developing his businesses, he thought that instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to succeed, I have to succeed, success is the only way, a sort of blind obsession, blind obsessed kind of success from the start. Rather, he had this mentality, okay, no, 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 no. Rather than me claiming success before it has arrived, I'm going to assume the system is failing and then keep reducing the actual percentage of failure. So it's like you don't have expectations, and you look at the system and you constantly reduce what is the inefficient portion of it. Do you know? I find technologies, when it comes to technologies, only one fundamental philosophical debate needs to be done, and that is what is efficient and what is inefficient. And the definition of efficiency will suggest how advanced our civilization will be. If efficiency is just technological efficiency, guess what? We're technologically very advanced. But if we want to think about efficiency to be not just about the technology, but the users of technology, how the human being's eyes open to the world to animate as a form. So, what I mean by that is that if you ask yourself, listen to my sentence, who owns this body? You're going to see it is an identity. It's you, right? You say, this is my body, you know? When you go to the doctor, you say my leg hurts, So we have ownership of this objective phenomena, but then I asked, what is observing this objectivity? And I realized the identity of me, it's like, can you bring your ego and put it on the table? You can't. The ego is, you can say at most, if you want to speak about it, is a coagulation of visible patterns in the conscious view. Um, I'd appreciate it if the audience can let me know if my voice is clear, like if the sound is okay or not. Anyways, what I'm saying is the subjective realm is visible but not physical. The objective realm is physical and visible. In other words, it's um, the study of phenomena prior to language and after language. I am speaking to you right now in a sort of aftermath of a sort of, I don't want to call it a language war, um, but every person is not just trying to maintain physical balance, they are also trying to maintain subjective balance in this in the light of the world they see. This is why desire is kind of like a box in your head if you become too obsessed. That means, let's say you're thirsty, you desire a glass of water. Should the ancient yogic practices say, yo, do you have desire? You can't have desire, man. It's like, no, no, that we don't want to be blind believers of a changing system. That means we're photographing our moments and assuming that is knowledge. There's two types of knowledge. There is one that is dynamic and one that is static. Static knowledge, very easy to communicate through language. Dynamic knowledge cannot be really, ultimately, it can't. It can't. Like, at most, it might be poetry, might be able to touch it, but there are realms of experience occurring. That means there's something happening that has nothing to do with the language as a sort of part of the contents of the moment of one's experience. So, in other words, I'm kind of saying that we associate with what we see, but the mind is a sort of inner sight. And that in that inner sight, when you realize the nature of the mind, you can, in some sense, work with it. You know, just like how a person, for example, sees a bow and an arrow, and you're in an archery range and you're practicing, and eventually, like, you take a bunch of times mechanically, but eventually you just feel it out. Your mind just wonders, if I was in a war right now and I had to make this shot. Anytime you make something important, the genius of your inner realms marches outward. What I mean by that is, when something becomes important, the resistance and the doubt of consequence evaporates. Do you know what I mean? The secret of genius is to discover the importance of attention, to study the nature of how you are a creature of self awareness. What does that mean? That means there is a self, the shape, the objects, and the subjects, and then there's the awareness. Excuse me. So we are oscillating between individual conscious language oriented creatures and collective unconscious non linguistic oriented creatures, experience oriented creatures. I feel there is always two sides to a coin. And so, what that means is, everything that we see we're existing as right now, I wouldn't be surprised if there is the opposite of this existing in another dimension. You see, I've kind of looked at the concept of parallel realities, and I wondered why. Why would a creature on, like, what is the value in a Homo sapien an evolved creature, a sophisticated creature on the surface of this planet to consider other worlds or other dimensions or parallel reflections. I call them reflective dimensions. These really what scientists call parallel realities. I call them reflective realities because they are in parallel to a sort of design. That means in the show Rick and Morty, for example, you see there's an episode where it's like the citadel of Ricks, and so pretty much it's like all the different senses of self from different parallel dimensions of this character in this show Rick and Morty were all in one base. We're living like it was a really actually ahead of its time idea. So, anyways, in this person and all his different selves from different dimensions, there had to be one design of a fundamental core. That means there must have been the first piece placed. So in when I say reflective dimensions, that means they are reflecting the first piece, the first movement. They are more. What I'm saying is the dimensions are seen as an effect. So parallel realities, reflective dimensions, as I say, these reflective dimensions are kind of like imagine. It could appear as different selves in the same world or as different worlds in the same self. So it's very hard to when somebody asks how much freedom does a bird's wings have to move? Well, the answer will be dependent on the effort the bird is called towards. You know, there's something phenomenal. You know how a young child, you give it a toy, very young child, and the child is laughing, happy, and then you take the toy away, the child cries. This is a child before learning language or whatever. And then you give back the toy to the child, and the child totally smiles again. It's as if its sadness was meaningless. It wasn't in meaning yet. I don't know what it is about the unknown that causes knowledge to evolve. I feel it's not just human beings that have a life cycle, a certain lifespan, but I feel ideas have a lifespan too. And some ideas have a shorter lifespan compared to other ideas if the ideas remained in the human attention. So, what it is it's kind of saying like, as much as your mind is fragmented, the world can have endless dimensions. You can shatter a mirror constantly. You can break a mirror and suddenly have endless dimensions. Do you know? Animate various dimensions. But you can also see the whole mirror as complete. So it's like you finish the puzzle and it's like you either see that picture the puzzle was making or you see the lines that are all the puzzle pieces. So once the pieces come together, once the fragmentation of mind due to a sort of natural abidance by whatever the authentic self means to you, whatever your own authenticity means to you. Life cannot have. This is a kind of strange thing to say, but if people had a savior, they still wouldn't know what to do after they were saved. So the issue of all our technologies doing the work for us, all the superheroes fighting the chaos for us, is that the standard of the average man's vision does not develop. There is a poet named Rumi, Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. He's kind of like this Sufi dervish Persian poet, and he says from, I think, I don't know, 700, 900 years ago, something like that. And he has in his poetry, he says something so remarkable. That means if there was a museum for uh, paragraph great works of writing, this would definitely be in that museum. I died as a mineral and I became a plant. I died as a plant and I rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. When was I less by dying? Oh, sorry, I'll say it again. Why should I fear death? This is the quote. Why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? So why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? And then he says, I shall die once more as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from hood I must pass on to that which no mind has ever conceived. The evolution of the conscious individual into the inconceivable uh, collective being. It is how the caterpillar has no choice but to listen to the call of nature. A realignment of all connotations. The sacredness of nature. There was this kind of this whole idea of sociological perspective that it's like people were using cutting trees to build temples, then praying for a better climate. Do you know? And so chaos and order is a law, I think, are found in any dualistic system. And really, what is unique and should be cherished is any sort of skill that has found any sort of balance between sort of self generated chaos and order. The yin yang symbol is powerful because it shows in one circle, in one moment, the dance of chaos and order is occurring. The dance of worlds and selves and all this is occurring. Every thought you have ever known. What has your experience been of it? Now, I don't know how people are, but because when I sleep and I wake up, the reason I say it feels like a new day, because it's as if my thoughts were like somebody took, like I took a stick and I wrote sentences on the beach, the water came and washed it off. When I wake up in the morning, I'm still aware of existence, like existence is, I'm being like here, like I'm aware of this, but it's like this, the sense of novelty is because that's kind of what was written on the sand was washed off. Because if we had a total memory, we would also have a total guilt. What this means is thought comes and goes. Chung Tzu, a very wise human being, he said thoughts are like leaves on a tree. They change every season. Can you imagine, like, your belief changing, but the texture of your belief changing as the seasons pass? You know, you can even argue that a person's psychological beliefs will change if they are in a cold temperature or a hot temperature. Usually, when the human being is not in their natural state, the unnatural state is a situation where the being has to maintain balance. It's like the reality is shaky. And when it maintains balance too long, it realizes too much energy is going, you know? So I noticed that the person, to be honest, you have an intelligence to remember everything. You know, you can. Uh, you can have various landscapes arise in your subjective realm. But the thing is it necessary and is it natural? And in my exploration and introduction in this lifetime to what I felt was the unknown moving knowledge, that's when I say what I how that's how I would define divinity. When the unknown moves knowledge. Now, if divinity is a shape or not, that's this world is moving so much that to dare try to interpret it from a corner of it, it's as if like just just put a box on your head and get over it. Reality has limitations, but the cool thing is that we, even though I say we're in the era of language worship, and like as of 2020 we have gone into the era of advanced communication. What that means is before we pick up trash, we have to pick up the trash of our minds. And to pick up the trash of our minds means to reestablish a new experience, a new relationship, a direct a new relationship with how one is directly experiencing life. And most people feel that their past has to be there or they have no character. Let me tell you, character is not just the image you have of yourself. Your character is your ability. Your character is uh, your ability to respond, and inevitably your responsibility of the moment. The parts of the moment. See, every person can be said strangely. Let's say you have five people sitting at a boardroom table. You know, and each has a strategy of development. Yet they realize the one who speaks first sets the shape. And I'm kind of pointing to you that you are so free as a being in this life that you can choose what that freedom means. And so it's the dynamism of the ability to move through this life. Like, of course, if I want to just identify with my objectivity, it's like that. If I want to be a materialist, then what's the point of atoms endlessly till the end of time just hovering in space? What's the point of all these appearances of civilizations in this macrocosmic landscape? Another way of saying it is why is it so big? you know? It's as if they told that this kid went up to his parents. Imagine, I'm going to create a story here. And the kid went up to his father and it's like, Father. And the father's like, What, son? And and the kid says, Why is the world so big? And the father thinks. And the father had heard a Mr. Within talk, so he suddenly realized the polar opposite. And he looks at the kid and he says, You think you're small, because you are small. And so this game, this endless psychological program of big, small, good self, good self, bad. What is this? We're playing bad cop, good cop with our own personalities in regards to emotional turbulence that occurs throughout the day. You can choose to linearize reality, but when I say language is evocational, it means really all our linearity is. It's like when there's imagination, reality isn't really just reality. The non physical maintenance of physicality, ultimately, I would like to link it to the concept of the Tao. And the reason is because as much as a person is acquainted with symbology, with shape, design, the language of design, at some point, the effort to move, the first effort to move is the new self. What I mean by that, guys, is that when you wake up in the morning, there's a sort of no opinion yet kind of state. And in that sort of just pure observant state, the first effort to act, the first emotion you have when is linked as this with the same effort. Pretty much, I'm saying how you wake up will suggest how your karma happens. How you literally wake up, I mean. So, anyways, I gotta change this song. I'm listening to this ambient track that is just too heavy. There we go. I found the perfect song. Imagine we look at a branch of a tree, any branch of a tree. If you're outside hearing my talk right now, see a tree, you know. If you're if you have a window, look out and see a tree. You know, if you really don't have a window, look at a picture of a tree. But what I'm trying to say is that when you look at the branches, when the branches extend outwards, they are endlessly segmented, fragmented. They're branching out. But when you reverse engineer the branch of knowledge, you really come back to the same trunk. So ultimately, based on the attitude and approach and attention of the human being, reality states of mind are being interpreted. And so when you have a sensitivity to your own experience, you start caring. Anything you become good at, you care a lot for it, believe it or not. You have to care so much for it that you're willing to put away other archetypes of your own being to just focus on just being that. This is why when I see, for example, like Olympic athletes, it's, I mean, on some level, if an extraterrestrial was watching, it's like, why are all these people watching one of them jump pretty far? But I'll be like, on another level, it's fascinating because it's an effort, because it is a suggestion and testament to how far a human being is willing to go in one direction, you know? And so, really, and ultimately, you can't ignore talking about the individual without exploring the context world that it arises in, the various social structures and the history of everything. For me, the reason I was drawn to philosophy, because it was another way of kind of reading different people in history and being like, how did this guy look at the world? How did that guy look at the world? How did this guy? And eventually I realized that all these people in history were just moments of sight that were countered. They were a counter response to what was the immediate information. So I began to kind of change my perception on really what knowledge meant, and it shifted from being just a pure kind of intellectual on paper kind of game to an actual question of, where is my uncertainty, where is my doubt, where is my weakness, how much of it like, for example, when you read Sun Tzu The Art of War, he speaks about like the victorious general being one who has acknowledged heaven and earth and their balance. That means it's as if generals, like, imagine a spiritual general, and this general is even seeing forces unknown. But really, it's a balance between heaven and earth, which means abiding with the clarity of the moment. Whoever reaches the clarity of the moment first usually can choose to communicate it. It's kind of like baseball when it comes to subjective uh, exploration, as if behind our eyes there's also skies that we can't measure. In the subtitle, I've said invisible survival, because what is surviving is a thought that is changing. That means it's as if, like, you kind of really look at it in a bigger picture. It's as if evolution is the transformation of matter into thought, you know? So I have no idea how a materialist would define intelligence aside from a illusory appearance. So I kind of feel the civilization is going to graduate from subconscious uh, self-definition. Language is going to become a technology rather than us. When your language, that you get angry really quickly. If you say, I have these beliefs and this is me and this is me, if you have incredibly strict boundaries, anything moves can break that boundary. How many angry people in the world have gotten angry at the wrong person at the wrong time? Like, as if like the person got angry at someone who didn't do anything, who just entered the room. Sometimes I wonder, what are we trying to prove as a species in all our sciences and realms of and through the mathematical language? What is the effort? And it's kind of like our minds are an extension of the earth. I feel like we consider a mind, but if somebody said, put your mind on the table, like, how can you do that? Your mind seems to be a sphere of awareness, sensory awareness at first. And then what contains this, the uniqueness of it, just the individual, the personality of the person. You got to understand the concept of a soul should not be shunned so quickly. The concept of a soul was pretty much what people had no choice but to consider an unknown X factor to the individualism of the people that were alive. And this unknown X factor was the will. And it's strange, guys, because I felt we had to. We had to on some level. It's like without religion in the 6th century, we would now not have human beings caring for books. Like, who would care for a book back then? When an object becomes important, you get defined by where your attention is. When I was younger, I would enter playfully, I'll say rooms, like have different experiences of my life. Not literally rooms, I'm saying that as a metaphor, but different rooms of life experience I would enter. I would reserve my will. And strangely, many times, there's been many situations in this life where um, I felt I was like the wind. Yeah, I felt I was like the wind. Literally, there was no identity, there was no, I was observant of thought, but it was like there was no association with a sort of condition. And the condition arises because of the character in the story. So, what that means is you need to have an ego if you wanted to entertain the world subjectively. But if the concept of self is realized not to be just a projected thought, then the person can observe their own. Strangely, your imagination is your creativity. Like any person who's had a dream, trust me, you're super creative. Your mind, even though your body's inactive, generated that imagery. I've had dreams where I'm like, whoa, why isn't my reality like this next level? You know, I'm like, why is it when I sleep? And I realize because it's the energy. I think when we sleep, it's not that. It's like I have this impression like some people feel the human body is like a battery. Some very this rabbi, which was a professor, which I forget his name, he gave this brilliant metaphor where he said it was we are packets of energy. And when you think about it, it's like, holy shit, yeah, we are kind of like biological containers for some sort of energy that can now be controlled. We're like a remote control car where the remote controller is being controlled by the car. Life is really incredible. You have to free yourself from the conditional because the unconditional inevitably comes. To be honest, I do acknowledge mortality, but the concept of death is when the unconditional enters the experience. So any time in my life, it doesn't matter if like currently I'm alive, but I'm saying like There has been moments where certain unconditional things that I had no control over happened, and I could see how archetypes were dying, literally ways that I had projected my sense of self collapse. And so in those moments, it's like I realized ever since my childhood, I knew. And the reason is, guys, I think because I maintained a conscious memory before language. So before I learned language, I have a very vivid memory of a room. Literally, I don't know any language, but and there was a stillness of presence that the mind had really early become conscious of. One may say, where do you draw the line between what is a memory and what is imagined? What imagination you can say is chaotic, the chaotic movement of subjective phenomena. Memory is the ordered movement of subjective phenomena. That means if I tell you right now, remember some moment of your childhood and you remember it, that remembrance is kind of like an instant image. So what it is effort of action. We are literally like a kind of static moment where our attention brings forth effort, is instantaneously the effort. And when you discover this instantaneity, the body is very comfortably allowed to be still. You'll start enjoying stillness as much as movement. You'll begin to realize that the equality we really need in life is not like how unfortunately nowadays in Western civilization you can say political correctness is a sort of chaotic retaliation against an illusion. But what if every person you had seen, their you had of them was limited to your experiences? How much more of a student of the world would you become? Sadhguru, this guy who was a yogi, and you can find him on YouTube. I consider him to be a very incredible communicator. He says he says that when he was a young kid, he went to school, and the teacher was talking, and he suddenly was so alert that it was for a second in that moment he realized that kind of like he would tell the teacher, if I remember correctly, it's like, I don't understand what you're saying, you know, because he, as far as he was concerned, regardless of like recognizing the words the teacher was saying, he realized he was limited to only what he was seeing out of those words. And this is kind of like how they say an artist gives out an artwork. It's really no longer his artwork anymore. It belongs to the world. You know, every sight upon the view is a new view. Anyways, guys, my whole point is sensitivity to language, evolution of the civilization through direct experience, the recognition that what is the purpose of freedom? It is to really innovate. That's it. That means in this life, this is how you can categorize all the people on earth. Either you are doing nothing, either you are, either you're doing nothing, either you are looking for something, or you are creating something. There we go. And when you acknowledge these dimensions to life, that the Buddha would say these are the three jewels. That's something you gotta acknowledge about this human existence. That there's impermanence, imperfection, and incompleteness. You when a human being, the Buddha was saying that like when you acknowledge these three views and you realize them experientially for yourself, what can you do but accept the world that's moving? We are existing in an intelligence that no longer just needs to identify individually. So philosophy is going to, we're going to need a lot of philosophers because reality is becoming a weirder and weirder place. And philosophy is another way of saying wondering how thoughts are emerging in the moment. Feel that when you look at life as a designer, there's no story, there's no emotion, and sometimes I felt like this was a sort of chaotic dimension of my perception that it's like some moments I've experienced where there has been no emotion and just pure design, even geometrically abstract design. And in those moments, I've been shocked of how there has not been an emotion, but that shock was of kind of like it came after. I don't know how to explain it. So what I'm saying is we are navigating our attention as the moment of intelligence is navigating through various states. And when you first get a recognition of the elemental being, I feel like chemistry and biology must be taught to children at a very young age. And then we go on to the superior languages. The whole educational system should be just defined instead of having grades. What is that? Why are we having a certain kind of world war mentality? Do you know the educational system hasn't evolved so since the 1900s, where soldiers had to go in one bunker and kind of memorize everything and run to the other bunker and share it, and it was a sort of filter of seeing what kind of soldiers uh, they could bring to the battlefield. So when you realize the educational system is outdated, it is very ignorant to how there is 8 billion unique beings with unique DNA and perceptions and various intensities of ability, various tolerances, you know? It's like, it's kind of strange, but in mystical psychology, when you realize nothing ever mattered, you purely perceive matter because there is no longer fear of what will happen. When time shifts, when you discover a moment as an observer of time when Plato said time is the moving image of eternity, that means he as an eternal being is moving time. I feel that's what he truly meant. That we have a relationship right now that the self is conditional, the world is unconditional, existence is going to continue, but how we exist through a sort of unique energetic pattern and a sort of intelligence as a creature. It's like it doesn't matter how much the eyes of the individual opens when the eyes of the collective is closed. So either the options is the individuals begin opening their eyes or the collective opens its eyes. That means either the bad guys choose to be good or the good guys do something about it. And when I say good, I don't mean like just a utopic kind of society, a civilization. I had this vision why are we just functioning? Everything in life appears dualistic. You have two brain hemispheres. When you look at your physical biological body, there's a symmetry to it. So it's like a sort of dualistical, symmetrical kind of nature. It has been apparent in everything as a human being. You have two eyes, and yet you see these two eyes see the same. So what does that mean? I felt, why do we have one civilization? We should design civilization like the yin yang symbol. I feel that we should have this mentality as a species that there are out technologies and inner technologies, yet the user is in the middle way, and that's when the Buddhic philosophy enters the technological ignorance. And not Buddhic philosophy. I mean, what the Buddha discovered, anything that anyone in the world has ever discovered, the known is shared. The known is kind of like some person found berries in a hunter-gatherer society and came up to everyone. He's like, "Yo, guys, I found berries," and then the whole civilization was like, "Yo, everybody has berries," you know. You know? We are too defined by the objective reality. We're too defined by the subjective reality, and what is left. And then it's like an attributeless experiential presence of the moment. And then it's like ultimately, I feel we are drawn in a situation where life, you will, it's like for how many, I'll tell you, any person who has ever heard the concept of, I don't know how to say it, like if you act falsely to yourself repetitively without stopping, there will come a time where it will suddenly not make sense for you to act falsely, and the energy will, it's literally, you will get tired. This is why tired people are way more open to being honest than, than not tired people, energetic people. So, anyways, guys, these Mr. Within talks are kind of like my strange, the kind of digital journal. Not only does every day happen once, not only has the moments been changing since the beginning, but the attention that the moment has been changing through has found a sort of, it's kind of strange. It's like eternity sometimes is there before temporality. That's the sort of eternity where it will always be beyond the language threshold. That means I'm telling you, it's like so many people are gonna realize how much I feel like, you know, like the concept of the language threshold is, I think, one of Mr. Within's contributions. It's so necessary. Without the concept of the language threshold, if we had an attempt to enlighten civilization, it will eventually reach a point where people would be just like, ego, ego, ego. People are just pointing at a problem of the source outside. This is something interesting that anytime you blame anything outside your experience, you will feel uneasy. Because on some level, no being can lie to how their mind is being their whole moment. So think of every person you have been violent to and cruel to simultaneously bring evoking that projection of violence and cruelty to your own mind. It's like you cannot hit someone without hitting yourself, without damaging yourself. And that's the ultimate truth, and all external chaos must be internalized. That means, like, get rid of anger before it gets rid of you, get rid of uh, ignorance before it gets rid of you. There's two options. And really, I feel, I don't know, I mean, I'll be honest, I feel like some may have, some could say I've been very, I don't know, I've experienced both inefficient and efficient moments. And I've realized that if the efficient was more of a better experience, then the inefficient should not be tolerated. And so, really, it's not okay to be a sort of dictator outside, but internally, in regards to how you constitute, how your eyes open up to knowledge, you must give yourself the freedom of the greatest writer that has found the greatest empty page. It's like when you realize life is not just for the individual to be something to others, they're also something to themselves. Now, what is that value? And I feel any person who goes the path of self inquiry will eventually notice their experience, how they are a rhythm of conscious experience throughout the day. I say rhythm because it's just like how we blink and close our eyes, just like how The sun's beams have kind of made our experience on this planet to be like a room that goes on and off the light. So the light goes on and off. So our psychology and our heartbeat and our everything, I can totally see it's like um, the the macrocosm authored the microcosm, and I'll end it there. The greatest invisible survival, to realize where all beginnings began and how the moment was the moment before any idea was born. What can presence do? It is all action and non-action simultaneously. And what is beyond that state? Your own trust. Wherever your trust goes next, it's like that's where you're headed. What you trust, you can work with. What you don't trust, you can't work with. So when you trust your own intelligence, suddenly like it just amps up. It becomes like a car you can put in gears. Or it becomes kind of like an intuitive rhythm, as if like you threw a leaf into a river and the rhythms of the river were kind of moving the leaf everywhere. We think life was static first, then we became conscious, and then it became dynamic. But actually, it was dynamic. It was dynamic in ways that before we ever had a sense of balance, we were just a movement. We were unconscious movement. Think of it this way: like the story of existence is unconscious, a sense of unconscious static moment, and then unconscious movement, then a sense of conscious static moment, and then an unconscious sorry, yeah, a sense of static moment, and as a conscious dynamic moment. So do you see what I mean? There has been an evolution through us, kind of like stepping on stepping stones. And when you step on a stepping stone, one foot is stabilized in one perception, and then the other foot is moving on to another perception. You know, and the experience of reality is like that. Study your objective realms, study your subjective realms, realize they're pretty much the same moment. Zen Master Dogen says, to walk the Buddha's path is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. That means you see beyond how you're keeping the meaning of yourself. So evolution is a sort of uh, the new can define the past rather than the past defines the new in a certain way till the end of one's life. Like, you know what I mean? Life is more than just temporary beliefs. We are, Your attention is the god of your thought. We are creatures of attention before we're creatures of language. That's why I call it the linguistic simulation. That's why I say there's a language threshold. A human being can have an experience that cannot be communicated through language. That's the language threshold. That's how the subjective realm cannot really be the objective realm, and the objective realm can't really be the subjective realm. But because we can see both of them, we have an inspiration to influence each in accordance to what we see, which dimension we see first. And life is worth wondering about. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.